Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Automotive Logistics and Supply Chain Europe Live. Me, Christopher Ludwig, and this session looking at sustainable supply chains gaining momentum. I don't think it's a topic that could be more relevant, especially for those of you following the news. Early this morning, EU negotiators from the EU Parliament and member states reached a tentative deal to enshrine climate targets in law. That's in the carbon neutrality by 2050, and importantly, a 55% reduction in emissions by 2030 compared to 1990. All that's a compromise and followed lots of debate, but it will matter, as we'll talk about in this session. And it's not just about what's happening clearly in the next decades ahead, or even what's happening in 2025 or 2030, but what's happening now in the supply chain right now. Perhaps also a good time to announce, to comment as well. Tomorrow is Earth Day, so we're right in line with obviously global initiatives and discussions here. And for those of you who know, this event is actually supported by a number of sponsors who are deeply involved in the sustainability topics, including Kuhn and Nagel to make this conference itself carbon neutral. And we at Automotive Logistics will contribute further to that initiative with some tree planting for all attendees of this event, and that includes this session, as well as some follow-up sessions we have right after this on decarbonizing air freight. So we'll look to add some bonus trees for everyone who attends across the next couple of sessions as well. So keep with us on that. We've been talking, of course, about sustainability over the last day and a half in numerous of our sessions. And those of you tuned in this morning to listen to Leon van der Merwe from Toyota Motor Europe outlined already quite a number of initiatives that need to happen, both in the short, medium, and long term, from optimizing networks to looking at alternative fuels, modal shift, and of course, ongoing investments in new technology like electrification of commercial vehicles. And again, I think what this session is about is, of course, looking at the goals and targets and all the stages that need to happen. But as I mentioned right at the start, we really want to bring home more of the wins that are happening now, initiatives that you can get involved with, and best practice for companies to be considering, again, right here in 2021. We've got a number of experts joining us in the discussion today, and we're going to start with two manufacturers on the panel to give us a sense of how sustainability initiatives are then cascading across the supply chain, including in working with upstream suppliers. I'd like to welcome, to join me on screen, Tobias Rydin, who's the Director of Supply Chain Networks at Scania, and Peter Bedow, who's Community Manager for Freight in Europe at ZF. Welcome to both of you. It's great to have you here.
Hello. Thank you.
Just a short intro on both. Tobias is responsible for sustainability and digitalization for Scania's global logistics, as well as overseeing global material control and returnable packaging from suppliers in Northern Europe. So lots of interesting experience to talk about. And Peter is overseeing freight purchasing in Europe, and he also has responsibility for ZF's freight sustainability roadmap at a global level. So really relevant here, and lots of expert insight to share with us. I want to start, though, with getting a sense of the sustainability and CO2 reduction targets that your respective companies are working to, and the journey to net carbon zero, and give us some sense of the short-term, medium-term, long-term. So maybe I can start with you, Tobias.
Yes, for sure. Hello. We do have of course a lot of different target setting when it comes to sustainability, both as in a company as such, as on a global perspective, but also when it comes to logistics, we do have a number of different goals also within logistics. I mean, we have, of course, getting us a goal to having a fossil-free facilities when it comes to all our logistical centers and so forth. But as for my responsibility, as from the transport sector for both inbound and outbound, we have a target to basically to half our emissions from 2016 up until to 2025. So that is our short and mid-term target for us when it comes to CO2 emissions.
Great. And that 2025 target is coming right up. So I'm sure there's a number of things we're going to talk about that you've already done or are doing, and we'll come to that. But first, Peter, I'd like to hear from ZF's point of view.
Yes, hello to the audience. So basically in ZF, we have the target to be climate neutral until 2040 completely for the whole company in all areas, and to achieve 30% already in 2030. So actual focus for the whole company is in ZF to develop a roadmap with levers and targets for the upstream emissions down to the raw material of our suppliers, including all kinds of actions: purchase materials, services, SCM, our own facilities, up to the energy. Yeah? And therefore, I took over the responsibility for SCM and freights part in this sustainability program, and take care with a team out of all regions to cover all transport modes, internal, external levers, and participate in the discussion about the sourcing process of ZF to change fundamentally the way we sourcing products. To give an example, to talk about global versus local sourcing. And it's really challenging, and I appreciate to be part of that.
Wonderful. So let's focus in a little bit more on some of the shorter to medium term aspects, and can you identify where you are currently or see quick wins in logistics, where you want to work with your suppliers or your partners more to get bigger effect? And I can start with you on that one, Tobias.
Yeah, I would say that we are of course working with this to improve our situation and CO2 level, basically in a different number of aspects. But I mean, of course, we are working, since we do have all our transportation bookings and our material control in-house at our company. We can fully control that ourselves, and we are working constantly with this and optimizing our logistics setup day by day and week by week by our engineers, of course. But then at the same time, we are also working closely with our carriers, putting up demands on the market, searching for alternatives, fuel solutions, intermodal transports, of course, also depending on a different part of Europe mainly. And so we are constantly working and trying to team up with the bigger carriers that we are working close with, and try to find as sustainable solution as possible, which whenever we are tendering a specific part of Europe. So we are pushing this question, and we are quite heavily asking for this also in our tenders going out to the market.
So already an important impact in tenders and logistics purchasing decisions. I think that's really key, and we'll come back onto that. But Peter, how about from your point of view?
Yeah, ZF is developing and providing technology here for passenger and commercial cars. So therefore, we are really on the ground working on solutions for green technology. But we know it will take more time. Yeah. In the short and midterm, we definitely need to concentrate on areas for using eco-friendly modes of transport instead, or rail instead of air, for instance, or the avoidance of transport. Yeah, talking about local or global sourcing, or avoidance of using of special freight, the utilization of trucks and vessels. And this is some kind of learning curve that we have actually in our company, that there are more possibilities than just look into this technology field, that we can do in our daily work immediately some changes and some processes and some decisions that pay in to the decarbonization.
When we look at the current disruptions in the supply chain, and I don't have to dwell on them too long in terms of whether it's container shipping, material shortages, we see a lot of expedited freight. We see efforts to deal with this. Is that in at least the short term knocking back or constraining your ability to hit some of the targets that you might have set in terms of reducing logistics emissions? Peter, I'll start with you on that one.
Yes, so I think there is a mind change in all disciplines. Yeah, so for sure, SCM is touching everything. Yeah, about the production, material purchasing, logistic managers, top management, and all of the people need to accept that there are new targets now, that we're not just running for money or performance targets, and it will stay. So therefore, we really have to rethink our business processes and act in a different way. And this is the actual challenge. So to leave a focus on the pure piece price is is not modern anymore. So we need to develop a CO2 currency to balance decisions between money and CO2. So out of my responsibility, I meanwhile have learned that there is even some positive thinking that we can sell to say what saves money saves CO2 as well in some cases, as we are talking of efficiency, and that we can pay in for both a target, but it has to be explained to the decision makers and take away this fear of it's just all expensive. Nevertheless, some decisions have to be made, and it's not free of charge.
It is a good point there, and obviously, I'm sure it's an easier sell when it saves money up to the board level and such. But as we'll discuss, it's not always going to be the case. Tobias, what about from Scania's point of view? How are you balancing these targets with some of this immediate disruption and some of the other cost factors, as Peter alluded to?
But I think we need to divide the question of a bit here. I think because first of all, we don't see the sustainability journey as a kind of a short term journey. This will be quite a big journey for us going along the company for many years ahead now, and has been so since many years as well. And there will always be disruptions. I mean, things will always happen in the supply chain. Things will always change that we couldn't predict and so on. But we need to, for us, it's extremely important, even though we are now facing, of course, a challenging time throughout the supply chain. We need to keep our focus also on the long-term commitment we have when it comes to sustainability. We need to continue to push the question. We need to continue to ask for better solutions. And then we know for sure that this will be a challenging year to live up to the target that we have for this specific year. But as when it comes to the target setting for our 2025 targets is still valid. So we need constantly to balance in between the cost and quality and the sustainability issue. And I think that is the tricky part. And for us, as being a company who would like to drive the shift towards the sustainable transport system, of course, we need always to have the sustainability part as top of our agenda all the time when we take decisions.
You both work for very global companies. Scania, of course, is part of the Volkswagen Group and also with its own operations in different parts of Europe, South America, of course, ZF with a footprint around the world. When you take the sustainability picture for logistics and you look across regions, clearly there's lots of variations when you have whether the operations, the technology which might be in place, the sorts of transport equipment, etc. Do you have a way of accounting for these differences, and do they sort of take different, perhaps priority is the wrong word, but do they change slightly on the journey based on those regions? Again, Peter, maybe I can start with you there.
Yes, so there are definitely differences that we recognized during our project work. The usage of transport modes is different. The development of the technology is different. For instance, in China, the electric vehicles are already much more in usage than in Europe. And gas trucks, for instance, can be used in Europe, but not in the other regions. So we need to consider this in the development of our roadmap to value measures and potentials in the right way and respect these differences amongst the regions. And this is covered in our lever roadmap and based on the regional expertise. So not all measures are valued in the same way in the regions. And therefore, we're really trying to get the best out of each region and work on the right projects to get better.
Tobias. Yeah, I can basically just agree with Peter. We do have the same approach. We don't have the same solution for every part of our transport network. We look very closely into what the different kind of possibilities and where we can find possible alternative fuels, for example. So this is we have a very detailed plan about each and every region, how to do it, how to approach it, and what solutions to push for. So it varies quite a lot. I mean, depending on the maturity level when it comes to, for example, for more sustainable fuel.
When we start looking a little bit further out in terms of perhaps adapting new kinds of equipment or maybe even more aggressive modal shift, if that's what it is. I mean, what are some of key milestone points that that you would highlight on the roadmap, whether it's a shift to electric trucks or a shift to something else? I mean, are there some key points? Tobias, I'll start with you.
Yeah, but I think obviously we do believe that for when we come to an electricity and electrical trucks, that will be kind of the solution that will solve a lot of our challenges when it comes to this issue, at least. But that will of course take a time until we have that up and running and in a full scale throughout our whole supply chain. So we need to work with the different solutions up until that solution is in place, and that could of course varies depending on, as I said before, depending on the different regions we're in. But there are some bridge solutions up until, I think, as we're working closely to find alternative fuels, such as, I mean, for some kind of biogas and biodiesel and some other solutions as well, and also of course working with trying to find good intermodal solutions. And that is something we are very open for, even though we are a truck manufacturer, even though working very hard to try to find good intermodal solutions as well.
Peter.
Yeah, so I can confirm it. Yeah, so the basic thinking is from people that we have to implement this alternative transport technologies, like synthetic fuel, battery, fuel cell, but it will take a longer period of time, and for sure it will be the major share of decarbonization. But to describe our program in ZF, we are using a triangle to describe the different directions and say the first direction is to avoid unnecessary transport at all. A transport that is not done at all is saving 100% CO2. To avoid special freight and air freight or long supply chains, that's really a change of the philosophy. And the second direction, therefore, is to use eco-friendly modes, rail instead of air freight, fully utilize trucks, and yes, ocean freight as well, to explain to the decision makers that we have some buttons to push right now that we can use to overcome the time until the new technologies are available in a way that we really can use it for our business overall. And to achieve targets until 2030, we have to use the other buttons to achieve some progress.
Before we go into a few more specific examples for some things, I wanted to raise the issue of the tertiary supply chain, tier N, managing upstream, and how that is, how you're accounting for that in your reporting and in your roadmap. And again, Peter, I might start with you there again as a tier one and perhaps at the front end, if you like, of dealing with that part of the supply chain.
Yes, for sure, this is a big challenge, because our OEM customers, if they look upstream, they have us, tier one suppliers. So for us, the supplier base is much more. There are much more suppliers that we have to work with, and then it's getting more complicated. And if we think of the material, the products itself, it's linked to development of technologies, usage of energy, and so on. And regarding our logistic and transport worlds, we organize the transports from our direct supplier, but not below. So means the indirect control of the footprint down to raw material is really not easy. And therefore, the suppliers finally and sub-suppliers need to execute the same program than OEMs and T1 suppliers. It cannot be controlled centrally by one party. So other companies have to move as well. And as we do know from our customers, this is linked to the nomination for new business, who is not able to show his program and decarbonization roadmap very soon, will not get new business anymore. And this goes down from the OEMs to suppliers and sub-suppliers down to raw material, and will change fundamentally the thinking and the pressure now came into the industry by these governmental regulations that OEMs need to prove their whole supply chain upstream, that it's that there is a decarbonization, and the pressure is going through now.
Fascinating stuff. Tobias, what about from your point of view?
Yeah, as I said in the beginning, we do have, of course, targets and target settings for different part of the company and driving different kind of questions. And this question basically how to run this sustainability issue with regards to the tier and suppliers, that is within our purchasing department, putting those demands to all our manufacturers. But as from a logistical perspective, I think it's important to say that at least we need to do our part. We need to do what we can do. We need to start looking now mirror first, and we need to push the questions that we think are important. And then, of course, there are the questions is extremely big, and as just Peter mentioned as well, it's really tricky to measure and to have influence everything. But at least we need to do what we can do from a logistical point of view. And we are measuring for our tier 1 suppliers up until our gates. So that is how we are doing it today, and within logistics.
And I suspect it's not. I know from speaking to other OEMs, it's not too different there. And as Peter also kind of alluded to, I wanted to turn, before we just bring on our next guest, ask you both what role packaging programs are playing in your sustainability roadmap, and how important it is as a means to reduce emissions. Can I start with you, Tobias?
Yes, for sure. I mean, this is a big target for us, of course, for different number of reasons. We are mainly working with wood and plastic within our packaging assortment, and we are working heavily trying to find as good possible solutions when it comes to wood, of course, but also going more and more now over to fully recycled plastic throughout our complete assortment within the plastics.
And Peter, what about returnable container packaging for you, for ZF?
I think there are two dimensions. The first one is the packaging itself, to use eco-friendly material. But the second one is definitely to better utilize the transport equipment and to avoid transports. It pays into this triangle that I described. And is a tool that we can use to optimize and getting more efficient. And therefore, we do have programs to link a business from different divisions and business units and plants to each other to develop networks that are using containers across borders to manage transports and allocate the containers to the nearest point of usage, and to avoid unnecessary cleaning, for instance. That's consumption of CO2 as well, to ensure that we're saving money and CO2.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you for some of those overviews. I'd like actually now, on the subject of packaging and returnable packaging, to bring on our next guest, Rodney Salmon. Rodney Salmon is Vice President of Automotive for EMEA at IPL Macro, also a leading independent packaging consultant with extensive experience in returnable packaging. Rodney, excellent to have you with us.
Hi.
And Rodney, I know you have something of a challenge for the industry, so I'd like to we have a couple of slides I'd like to call up and hand it over to you for a couple of minutes before we bring back our panel to talk a bit further.
Okay, great. Thank you. So during the conference, we've heard from Jano, from Stefan, from Lars, Drive Sustainability, Drive Plus Partnerships, Sustainability Toolbox. And Rydin in the last session told us about the head of VW saying we need more CO2 savings, responsible trucking, collaborative platforms. So what really is the low-hanging fruit, and why low-hanging fruit? I mean, what can you do right now at very little cost? So I'm just going to take you through a couple of slides for the next few minutes. Quite a powerful headline here: "Stop poisoning the supply chain." Well, a lot of our packaging that we're using now is actually doing that. And the article you see on the right hand side there, the steel stillage there, that particular product weighs 130 kilos and takes 30 kilos of product. That has got to stop. You cannot sustainability drive that kind of packaging forward. There's a huge opportunity to reduce emissions, reduce fuel consumption, remove waste products, reduce the number of journeys that trucks make, and even reduce the amount of tonnage that you put in the vehicle per trip, and therefore reducing tire wear. So if we can just move on to the next slide. I don't know where they've gone. I can't control it from here. So just going through those questions again. Oh, there we go. Sorry, next one on. Yeah. So how can we actually do this? Okay. So if we look at the amount of trips that the packaging actually goes through, if you've got a tier supplier that's got an OEM that's got over 450 tier suppliers, and that's tier ones, and then you've got twos and threes under that. You only need to look at 20 trucks doing 50,000 kilometers a year. That's a million kilometers. And if you were able to reduce the packaging per trip by between 5,000 and 10,000 kilos, you look at the amount of emissions that you could save doing that, the amount of tire wear that you would save, the amount of fuel that you would save. And just looking on the returnable aspect, okay, if you've got a truck full of plastic containers, you get an average of 260 large folding containers in a container, only weighing 30,500 kilos. With a metal packaging, you only get 176 in before you max out the trailer at 23,000 kilos. So there you've got an extra 10,000 kilos, okay, straight away that you're moving. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So how do we actually change this? And some questions for the OEMs and tier suppliers are, how do you look at taking out the metal packaging and really looking to replace it with lighter weight packaging? And a lot of times at the moment, okay, especially with time, a lot of the packaging engineers are faced with this prospect of something they'd like to do, but actually, do you know, I haven't got time to do this. I've got to do a new business case. I've got to justify it. I've got to put it in front of purchasing. Got to put it in front of my bosses to go through with it. In actual fact, we used this last time. I'm going to go with this again, and that's unfortunately quite common, and also sometimes explainable because where you've got a reduced number of people working in the packaging department or supply chain department, you haven't got the resources you used to have. So it's really important now that we actually go and one of the questions that I've got to the LLPs, the lean logistics providers, such as the big boys in the market, is that what are you doing to actually offer this to your customers? What are you doing to say, actually, I'm carrying a huge amount of metal stillage, every day in my trailers. If I was able to save the weight of each trip by 5,000 or 10,000 kilos, what saving could I give? What saving could I give to my customers, and what saving could I give actually to myself and to the tier suppliers and the OEMs that I'm servicing at the moment? So really, Chris, that's my message. That's the ask. It's something that we can do right now, and also at very little to no cost.
Bring me back. Thank you, Rodney. And why don't we bring Peter? Yeah, exactly. Bring Peter and Tobias back down. We could drop down the slides now, and let's unpack a little bit of what some of Rodney said. Now, actually, Tobias, you were saying just before that Scania is moving to more recyclable. I think you are largely with wood, and you're making some transitions already. So, reflections on this is lightweighting an essential part of the direction that you're going in terms of the changing the returnable packaging fleet, so to say?
Yeah, I think so. And there is, as Rodney also mentioned, there are quite many layers when it comes to packaging and how to solve that. I mean, we're working quite heavily, of course, as everyone else, trying to have as much as possible inside each and every box and in each and every pallet, of course. And then we are working heavily also trying to have as much as possible inside each and every truck, of course, to have as a high fill rate as possible, which is, of course, always good. And then we are at the other hand also then working with the material, trying to get the weight down and trying to get as suitable packaging as possible for us for the parts that we are delivering within our network. So I very much agree upon the question and trying to find as good an alternative material as possible is of course key for the future, I think.
Yeah, great. And Peter, similar from you, is that reducing metal stillage, for example, an objective as well for ZF?
Yeah, I think that's depending a little bit on the usage. Yeah? So ZF as a company is delivering products for little electronics up to windcraft gearboxes. Yeah? And depending on the products, we have to use different kinds of material for transport. And for sure, we are trying to increase the usage of plastic and KLTs, still using the German mesh box pool for a lot of materials if it comes to the gearbox business or shock absorbers and so on. And there is some special packaging as well. To use, especially for the special packaging, wood as a sustainable material is a goal anyhow. And again, the major aim is really to use the returnable packaging to avoid transports, because this is the major lever that we have here that we need to push and to utilize our packaging in the best way. And there are a lot of engineers working on. And this is something that maybe has now a further push. Instead of just talking about saving money for the company, we're counting now the CO2 currency as well. So it's getting more important.
Interesting key points there. We're going to come back onto that one. But Rodney, as Peter and Tobias have alluded to, clearly there are some commodities that specialize packaging for different commodities, and we need to work through that. I mean, where do you firstly, when we're talking about quick wins, low-hanging fruit, for example, I mean, what are the kind of commodities that you might recommend that could and should more quickly transition to lighter weight material? And I guess maybe a follow-on to that is there, do you see standards changing over time to kind of accommodate more of these commodities in the future?
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting because with the advanced technologies within plastics industry, okay, I think a lot of people don't realize that a folding large container can take 900 kilos. And that's a big weight. In Europe, up until recently, okay, it was only 500 kilos or 700 kilos if you only stack too high. But now there's suppliers in Europe that can supply folding large containers, 1200 by 1000 by 900, 980, that actually can take 900 kilos and stack 6 high. These are very strong bins, okay, and therefore there's a lot of metal stillages. And Peter was alluding to, I guess, a gitter box, metal mesh gitter box that weighs anything from 85 to 100 kilos. They take up to 100 kilos, up to a ton in those. And therefore there's a lot of plastic, so you can use that instead of using those type of containers that are a lot lighter. And I think that's a great way forward. One of the areas in packaging that the European automotive supply chain is way behind the US supply chain is in plastic packaging and lightweight packaging. In the US, for instance, for 27 years that I know of, that they've been using heavyweight plastic packaging. From 1200 by 1000 right up to 1.7 meters long, that takes 900 kilos. And a lot of you don't see a huge amount of metal being used in the automotive supply chain in the US, but you see a huge amount of plastic. And yes, of course, metal has its uses, and certainly in carrying heavy duty things, anything above 1,000 kilos. Like heavy duty engines, and etc. But I think that a lot of there's a lot of naivety in the European automotive supply chain regard to packaging and regarding to the weights that plastic and lighter weight packaging can actually take now.
Thanks for raising that. Tobias mentioned or maybe Peter, I think both referenced on some materials, sustainable materials as part of this transition. We've obviously also been hearing about initiatives in specific to packaging across the sectors, not just for automotive, in terms of reused PET bottles, ocean plastics, etc. I guess, are either of you or your company is involved with or exploring those sorts of initiatives? It's open freely to anyone, but Peter, if that's something you wanted to start with.
Yeah, for sure. In the end, it's depending on the possibility of use it in a proper way and cost. Yeah. So if this is, as Rodney mentioned, ensured, yeah, and we have some advantages, then it needs to be pushed. Yeah, and maybe one of the reasons is that it's not known yet, and that we have to bring it into our companies and to implement some new standards. Yeah. To use again this German meshbox pool, yeah, this is just a German show, but is used since many years to avoid transports, yeah, to be efficient, and maybe there are some new standards coming up, yeah, as Rodney explained, and we would be excited, yeah, to learn about it and take advantage out of that. Yeah.
Great. If anyone else wants to weigh in on that, by all means, just pipe up.
I'll just very briefly on that. Just say, look, yes, there's a huge amount of opportunity to take recycled material, and it does annoy me that the automotive industry gets a lot of bad press with regard to this. The biggest, the worst culprits as far as waste product is concerned and ending up in the sea and various other channels is probably the food industry at the moment, and supermarkets and people like that, to their own admission. The automotive supply chain is probably one of the most responsible supply chains with regards to sustainability in recycled and using recycled materials, not only using them, but actually collecting them back and depelletizing them and making new plastics out of them. And I think that it's very rare, I know, that you see any kind of media broadcasting good news, but certainly I think that the automotive supply chain globally should congratulate themselves on the recyclability. When you're using recycled materials in packaging, you've got to be really careful, right? When you're making a folding large container, 1,200 by 1,000 kilos by kilometers by the height, you're putting 900 kilos in it, stacking 6 high. You can't make that out of any material. You've got to make it out of pure virgin material, and you've got to have it safety tested to 2.5 to 3 times safety. Right? Yes, when you're producing lighter weight KLTs, Gallia boxes, Euro boxes, things like that, yes, you can use a lot more regrind in them and sustainability material. And it's getting hold of that material that's the key. And we're not going to get hold of material that comes out the sea just like that, okay? Because it's not available to us here, because we're not the culprits. The culprits, okay, are very much in South Pacific, Asia, around there, which is where you see all the plastic floating around in the sea and the plastic islands. And it's people that have got to get that out the sea and take responsibility for that and making it available to the plastic suppliers.
Thanks on that. Peter referred earlier to carbon currency, and I just wanted to bring this back to the fore a little bit to get a sense of just what role and how big a role will it play compared to now. Will the emissions and these considerations play in the overall, in the purchasing and in this balance, particularly as we know in logistics, the balance between lead time, quality, low damage, performance and cost. How are you balancing that, and what impacts you're seeing? And I'm going to start with you on that again, Peter.
Yeah, I think this is one of the most challenging questions. Yeah, there's a new target dimension coming in, and it will stay for a very, very long time. And we have to balance this target amongst others. So first big task is that we're working on to install a proper reporting. Yeah? And the philosophy, what you can't measure, you can't work on. and then start really the discussion and giving some rules within the company how we're taking decisions in future. So the currency is one option to translate money into CO2, or another one is to talk about buckets, to give budgets of CO2 consumption to functions and to commodities, and base a target setting on that to reduce it. These are discussions amongst the industries within our company, and we're in progress of developing a system that is necessary to track and trace our activities and get successful overall in the long run. Because one possible danger or risk is that we are reducing together with a forwarder as our partner in a ratio 3% each year CO2, and then we exchange the partner and start again by zero. This should be avoided. We need to follow a strategy there, and therefore really a tracking, controlling system needs to be installed. And it's not just about freight and forwarders, it's about all activities that a company does, and therefore a common standard needs to be installed.
Critical points there. Tobias, from Scania's point of view.
I think this is an extremely important question for us, and we have been working quite a lot with this, and we're having a model basically saying that we're not going for a specific CO2 price. We have not put up a price, since this is almost, at least how we see it, almost impossible to do it, since this is a very dynamic world. It changes all the time, and it depends on the region where you're tendering and where you're going out on the market. So we're trying basically instead to weigh our different priorities together, looking into each and every part of the world that we are putting up a new transport solutions for, and looking at both of course of a cost perspective. We put in how the quality perspective, but we also at the same time then weigh the sustainability issues question at the same level basically. So we are searching for the optimal solution here, not saying, and that means that necessarily that means that we don't go for the cheapest solution. But of course, we're not going for the most sustainable solution either sometimes, but we are searching at least for a better solutions, but the best possible solutions given all the three priorities that we have. And I think this is the way how we push the question, because then we can continuously push the question depending on the region where we're in, and we can search for different solutions. So in all of the latest tenders that we have been up and running now, we have not chosen in any case the cheapest solution. We are putting up with we think is the most sustainable solutions going forward. I think that is a good way of showing that we take responsibility for also this question, also to drive this question throughout the supply chain.
Indeed. I want to turn to, we have a couple of audience questions that have come in, and I'm going to start with one here. Peter, you've been referencing a lot actually around, I guess the most sustainable transport in a way is no transport, or let's say avoided transport through optimization or other. But here the question is, what are plans to avoid empty transport miles, considering that you need, so in this case, you need to send the returnable packaging back to your supplier. What's the sort of plan there to reduce empty mileage in returnable packaging? Before I go to Peter or Tobias on that, maybe Rodney, I can just get your view on that first, in terms of what you see, in the industry, where it's been doing well, where it's being done well, and where it could improve.
Yeah, I think basically, probably the most sustainable way that packaging handled at the moment is through poolers. You heard Sanjeev Thakkar from Czech yesterday talk about life cycle analysis, and if you want to know basically, what your savings can be with carbon footprint and various other sustainable opportunities, Sanjeev's life cycle analysis can actually give you that information. And professional companies and poolers such as CHEP, etc., do have all this information to hand that they can actually give you the information. And it can save a lot of OEMs and tier suppliers a lot of money and a lot of time inside their own resource. by asking these companies to provide this information to them. And I think that's really important note. It's available now.
Peter or Tobias, anything you would add to that point or question?
Not from my side.
Okay, fair enough. Let's. I know we've run at the kind of time limit there, but I'm going to extend just by a few minutes whilst we have you here. There's a topic I wanted to put, maybe starting with you, Peter. To what extent are you looking at circular economy aspects in designing and planning your logistics, or how that will fit into your logistics, I suppose? Do you see more opportunity to reuse and integrate products and material?
Yeah, I think in general, this is a big chance for logistics, to increase the meaning and the importance of the real supply chain management and get a bigger influence here, definitely. So people are listening more, and we definitely have the chance to dig into other disciplines in production, in the into our supplier world, into the processes, and rethink our business. And we know, for instance, that customers are asking for regional or local content, and that we need to follow and transfer that into our world as well. And these are all things that have a big influence here for our own sustainability roadmap. And therefore, I'm really looking forward to work further on this and until my retirement, because this will need a long breath.
Absolutely. So, Tobias, I mean, on circular economy, obviously, this is not just a logistics topic, clearly, but I'm wondering how you're thinking about that from logistics. Just as an example, I know with an electric truck, for example, there's likely to be a lot of very valuable material that will be reused and feed into other kinds of loops. So how do you see that playing into your logistics?
But we can see quite a big change coming up here in this area, and even more focus on this question, I would say, as you just mentioned, Christopher, when it comes to for example, for the electrical trucks. So this is an ongoing discussion within the company about how to take this to the next step, how to take the best out of it, and how to address this question. And circular economy is very much a topic that is growing within our company, and we're getting more and more into it, I would say, and it's starting to play an even bigger role now, and it will for sure do that going forward as well.
Great. So we're coming up to the end here, and I just want to finish by asking each of you to highlight what for you is the most important change the industry should make now to ensure its logistics can reach sustainability targets in the future. Rodney, do you want to take that first? Oh, you're muted there, Rodney. First step, unmute.
Yeah, first step. Well done. I think I've covered that in some of it is reducing the CO2 emissions, and a challenge basically out there to OEMs and to tier suppliers is to go to your lean logistic provider and say, how many millions of kilometers, is my packaging traveling on your trucks every year? And how can I reduce the weight on this? How can I take some of the heavyweight packaging I've got and lighter weight it? And if I did lighter weight it, what would my cost savings be? So I think it'd be a very interesting question to put to the LLPs and it would be a very interesting answer to see how many millions of kilometers your parts and packaging travel every year around the supply chain. It's a good start to understanding the cost of that and how you could reduce your carbon emissions straight away.
So you have to measure first to reduce. Peter, let's go to you next. Most important change.
Yeah, sorry. So for me, the most important change is really the mindset. That in all over the industry, we are now facing a new decade, a new age, that this is getting important, and therefore the governments need to set guardrails. That the industry and the companies are working on that, because basically companies are there to earn money. And if the whole society wants to be climate neutral in 20 or 30 years, then the guardrails need to be set to motivate companies to work on that. And that's started now. And I'm really looking forward to see how this is developing. And it's a big chance for companies as well to put energy in developing new products, new services, and to change the whole way of working into something better. Yeah? And I'm really positive. Yeah? It's giving, personally to me, it's giving more sense into my work. To not just save money for my company, to do something good for the environment as well. That it gives a good feeling.
Purpose-driven logistics. I think that's a really motivating point for everyone in this event. Tobias, maybe to conclude, let's hear from you, the most important change.
I don't know if it's a change, but I would like to underline the importance of what we have done, at least, is to have a very aggressive target and a target set that is quite high and is extremely ambitious. I would say that our target to half our emissions in 10 years is very aggressive. And by having that and a full commitment throughout the whole company is basically will basically give you it will you will find solutions. You need to think differently. You need to do other ways compared to what you always have been doing, but really to have that as a full commitment and really to decide and just believe in it. I think that is the most important thing, to really to drive the question every day in what you're doing. I think for us that is extremely important and super clear within the company.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you all for the time today, for these insights and helping us identify some of these areas of improvement and the paths that we're all on. I really, your words resonate on purpose and setting these targets and everybody working to achieve them. I think it's something that is starting to focus the industry. So once again, thanks very much. Peter Bedow from ZF, Tobias Rydin from Scania, Rodney Salmon from IPL Macro. It's been a pleasure having you. And thanks to everyone putting your questions through. We didn't get to all of them, but we'll share them with the group. And obviously, if anyone wants to answer them further on the chat straight away, then I encourage everyone to do that and interact on the platform. Stick around, we've got more coming up. We've got another session on sustainability and decarbonizing air freight and a think tank on finished vehicle logistics. We'll see you real soon.